Okay, welcome to the increasingly inaccurately named SDC address for the week of January 1st or January 3rd, 2010. And first of all, I guess I'd like to apologize for the hiatus. We've gone, I think, a couple weeks without an address now. I've had lots of events going on in my life. We had a major move from California to Iowa, and I don't know, just the last couple weekends it would have been delivered either from a hotel room or, from my mom's living room or something with a bunch of kids running around or something like that. So, anyway, here we are, and we have lots to talk about. I might actually do 2 addresses, I'm not sure, depending on how much time this will really take. I figure I could easily do a couple different ones to satisfy people's sense of loss at going a couple weeks without one. So, first on the agenda is, of course, to discuss the recent reading I obtained from Douglas Cottrell. I took the opportunity to drive over to London, Ontario, and get my reading in person, and it was a just incredible experience on many levels. And so there's lots of stuff to share about that, and so if that takes up a whole hour, then I might have another one talking about some other recent topics I've been drawn to from the readings. So, first of all, I got my reading about a week ago now from Douglas Cottrell, and I was able to ask every major question that I had planned on asking. There were some subpoints I didn't get to or were rendered irrelevant by the answers I had gotten. So, to kind of go over those in no particular order, first of all, I started asking about my aging research, and that yielded some incredible answers, as of course you would anticipate. These are questions I've been dying to ask ever since discovering some of these first Edgar Cayce readings, like 10 years ago or something. So the first question I asked was about Edgar Cayce reading, I think it's 440-5, the one where he talks about the Firestone and how some guy used it to rejuvenate himself often, and it gave a few tantalizing hints about the technique, as in it said something about burning away the forces that caused aging or impurities or something like that. And so for years that was all I had to go on, and I basically took that to mean that some type of electromagnetic radiation was being used. I think I've touched on some of this before. At first I thought it was had to be ionizing radiation or something that would penetrate deeply, so I was looking at gamma radiation and X-rays and stuff. And after I sort of exhausted that, or to my satisfaction anyway, exhausted that, I guess one key study that really seemed to put the nail in that coffin was one done by and now I can't even remember the name of the laboratory right off the top of my head, but there was a government laboratory in Illinois or outside of Chicago or something in the 50s that did tons of experiments with mice with all different kinds of dosing regimens of gamma rays. And in particular, they had a few experiments dealing with exactly the regimen I had proposed as being the best at inducing a kind of adaptive response that would help clear out some oxidative damage or something. And in that test, it was universally lethal to the mice. over the long term. None of them lived as long as untreated controls. So that got me looking elsewhere, and still with just this one Casey reading basically to go on, I arrived at the fact that these impurities it was talking about were perhaps these aging pigments we have discovered in mainstream science that are thought by many to be a contributing factor to the aging process. And so it seemed to be indicating that these rays were used to burn away, that was the phraseology the reading used, to burn away these pigments. And also there were other parts of the reading that talked about burning or bodies that were on fire or invisible heat waves. And so this was very clear indication, now that I reread it, of infrared frequencies, not ionizing radiation. And come to find out, yes, there is a band in the near infrared that does penetrate living tissue, soft tissue, quite well. So it would be practical for basically a whole body treatment of some type. And so that was my main focus, was using infrared lasers, pulsed infrared lasers, because those seem to be the kind that do this type of thing well, to remove the aging pigment lipofuscin. So that was basically my first question. Was this reading talking about a solar pumped infrared laser being used to remove lipofuscin? Oh, and by the way, I should have mentioned this first. On my SDC site, which is nasonschooler.com/SDC, I've got a little section there where I've got the PDF, which I transcribed, and an MP3 of the entire audio portion of this reading. And it's the straight up stuff I simply muted out, and a couple references to proper names and specific addresses that might be compromising some people's confidentiality or something, I don't know, but privacy. But otherwise, it's the straight up stuff, the whole thing, even from the introductory stuff where the conductor's getting him in and getting him back out at the end. So I'm sure many of you will be interested. Feel free to dive in and just read the whole thing, but I'll try to give a brief synopsis of some of the salient features of the reading here. So the answer, immediately the source starts answering my entire question. All I got a chance to ask was it a solar pumped infrared laser? And boom, I get the answer to my entire, half-page long question. Not an uncommon occurrence, I guess, with these readings. And of course, I didn't show it to him ahead of time. If any of you are still skeptical about this process, no, I did email a preliminary copy of some of these to them. So I guess you could say, yeah, they had a chance to read up on all that. But there were some questions that weren't even in there, and that were answered just as readily and with the same, with the same facility. But anyway, so the answer immediately was, the source started talking about this vibrational rate of the cell, not necessarily the aging pigments, and how it was effective and at the vibrational level and all this stuff. And so that led me to some specific questions that I was wanting to ask about that, which was, namely, is this retina of the cell the centriole? And the answer was yes. And then I was confused about the filament. He seemed to be saying the filament and the retina were the same thing, but the centriole doesn't really have a filament. It's got basically two cylinders that are at 90-degree angles to each other within kind of a mass of specialized proteins and things. And he said, yes, the filament was basically at the same place or of the same structure. So then I asked for more details on that, and it comes out that it's apparently an energy gap or something that is between the two poles. It almost seemed to just be that he started talking about an filament made of energy. He did say it was of the same as the cytoskeleton on some level, but we haven't discovered, I don't know about the base end of those two centrioles. Within the centrosome, there may be some type of filament there, but as far as the outside ends, we've discovered, I don't think we've discovered any filament physical filament connecting them. But it almost, he did start to mention the subatomic levels and energies and things. So yeah, there could be some kind of meaningful subatomic interaction in the centrosome that enables it to serve as a eye, so to speak, for the cell, and also has something to do with this filament and rate of vibration that has to do with vitality and drawing energy or something into living life force, if you will, into the cell. Kind of a non-scientific concept, or a concept that hasn't been viewed as very scientific for a century or more. But anyway, I digress. So lots of information there about the cell vibration and how we could affect it and all this stuff. And but the overall picture that seemed to be painted was that this wasn't a quick and dirty experiment that could be done to draw attention to the readings. And that's been my main concern. That was like my main driving force. Is I was hoping that this was some, a silver bullet, basically, that we could discover that would be really radical and effective, and we would quickly arrive at it and could quickly draw attention to these readings. But the overall impression that seemed to be very clear was that wasn't going to happen. That this was more of a very complex interaction of different factors, as the modern theories of aging and legit science hold, that there are many contributing factors, that there are many types of treatments that can be used, each of which can add to the other in contributing to longevity, that there are interestingly many reasons why it would be difficult or impossible for us to achieve drastic improvements, like thousands of years at this point in time, based upon the limited discoveries we've made or the environmental conditions of the planet, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, lots of fascinating stuff in there about that. But overall, that kind of answered my underlying question, which was this the best, most effective way to draw attention to these readings at this point in time? And I think the answer is not necessarily. It's more of something that would be appropriate to continue to investigate as a part of a larger organization whose goal was to do many things, and we'll get to that. That could be the next thing. Basically, that was before I go on, he did mention again this Delawurl's work, like he did in some readings Ramachan Regolin had done. And, again, I'm like, Delawurl, what? So I asked him to spell it, and he spells it wrong. Basically, I think he gave me the spelling that was written on my paper. So it's like, I think it's one of those cases where you ask a specific question, and you get a specific answer. Like, I'm asking how to spell Delawurl, which has nothing to do with the name he's talking about, and he gives me that spelling of the word I just uttered. And so that whole exchange was kind of funny. But he said the conductor will give you the book later, and that was kind of a funny experience, because when the reading was over, Douglas Cottrell and I are just talking about, whatever, and while he's talking, he just kind of turns around or right before he's about to go out of the room, he turns around and with one hand pulls a book off the shelf and kind of passes it behind his back or something to me, and he's like, he says, well, I just got the impression that I was supposed to give that to you. I'm not sure why. And he walks out, and I'm like, oh, thank you. And it's this book. And I, in the text of the reading I transcribed, I have all the information about it. I wrote it all down. It's by Delaware. I think it's George Delaware and some other guy. It's called New Worlds Beyond the Atom. That was the particular book. Apparently they have a few others too, these couple of guys. So the two authors are Langston Day and George Delaware. Delawar. And apparently George Delaware had his own little company called Delaware, which is all one word, Delawar, Laboratories in Oxford. And And I looked that up online, and there's a little bit of sketchy information on Wikipedia and elsewhere about that I could easily find about how this guy kind of started up he had a career as something that was not directly related. I think he was a civil engineer or something, and then he somehow got inspired in the 50s, I think it was, to do some research into energy fields and living things or something. And it really starts to sound like Kirlian photography, and that's kind of a sub-question that I unfortunately didn't have the presence of mind to ask at the time, but I did have written down on one of my mini pages, was it related to the work of some of these other guys that I have just been reading about. Let's see here. Sorry, don't mean to waste valuable screen time, but this is the kind of thing that might be helpful to include in such a video here. Yeah, here we go. It's kind of upside down. But this relates to Kirlian photography, because while I was doing some background research inspired by the cultural readings that Ramstein Reglan had posted on YouTube, I started looking some stuff up, and that's where I looked up the stuff about cell intelligence and everything. And so Kirlian photography is not necessarily a dead field. If any of you don't know, Kirlian photography is historically the pseudo-scientific method they use to photograph people's auras and energy fields coming out of their fingertips and all kinds of things. And a lot of people think it's total bunk, but obviously there's something there that they're photographing. But it seems to be one of those things where the mechanism of doing so, it has to involve an operator. And all these types of things. And even in the reading I got, when I started asking about how to detect this vibrational rate, immediately it becomes clear that this involves the person taking the reading, or a couple of people, as much as it does just using a piece of scientific equipment to take a measurement. You know, it's like the measurer is part of the measuring process. And that relates directly to Marcel Vogel's work and stuff in that Secret Life of Plants book, and a lot of other things I've read. So it sounded kind of like Kirlian photography to me, and I looked it up, and there's a guy, Dr. Konstantin Koratov. I don't know if you can read this very well, but under my Kirlian photography heading, I've got his name, and he's got a website that's really extensive, and he seems to be kind of like a fringe scientist or something that publishes a lot of his stuff on his own site because he can't get it published elsewhere or whatever. But he sells several kinds of electronic devices. He calls them GDV for, I think it's gas discharge visualization, and EPC devices for electrophotonic capturing. And they seem to be more advanced and more refined forms of Kirlian photography type instruments for visualizing energy fields. And apparently you can see auras and chakras and the energy lines of chi going through the body and all this stuff. And related things. So I meant to ask about that, but it seems to be the type of thing he was talking about in the reading, where you would need to have a piece of equipment like this that would involve the operators and their energy fields. And he mentioned that what you're really looking for, it wasn't necessarily just reading a rate of vibration, as in you detect a frequency of light and you just determine what color it is or whatever. It was more of a resonance, a type of thing where you detect it by resonance, and that's not unheard of in science. In fact, I think in the Secret Life of Plants, that's where they were really successful. They found out if you have a device that has a given alternating current or something that's very weak, and then you study the interaction of that with the electric fields of the plant, or some kind of perturbation of that, some kind of frequency modulation or something, then you can get way more sensitive measurements than just outright measuring an ultra-weak photon emission or type of signal or something. Although in legit science, I found that is a new field of endeavor, is biophotons, or ultra-weak photon emissions. You go to PubMed, and there's some legit research on that stuff. which perhaps is related. I'm not sure. Yet another question I didn't have the time or presence of mind to ask, I guess. But could be fodder for future inquiries or whatever. But he gave me a lot. Just check that thing out. So yeah, Delaware sounds like an interesting book. New Worlds Beyond the Atom. It's out of print, and it was only published in England again, just like the Shattuck book. But I managed to get a copy of that on eBay, and there seem to be a few floating around, and also of his other books too. So hopefully I'll have a little collection of those at some point. But anyway, so the overarching message with the aging research seemed to be, yes, it's productive for me to be involved in. Yes, I am making some small progress, but it's a long-term thing, not a short-term thing. That was very useful information for basically where I'm at this point in my life, and it kind of answered some questions. So the other major topic I had related to kind of the PRE table indirectly, and so I did ask about that, and that related to some of this other stuff. And apparently my design that I've got right now is a halfway decent one at implementing the profound relaxation sound vibration therapy. So I'll continue to work with that and research that and as I have time. But he did clearly mention that when it comes to marketing and sales and everything, that I should definitely approach people that know about that kind of thing and can do the manufacturing on large scales and stuff. So I hope to grow that as well as part of all that, all this kind of a side service or business that we can provide. But the main focus seemed to be this basically, this SDC organization I'm starting now, where I do these weekly addresses, and they're a part of it, but of course I have a larger picture in mind, and the readings encouraged me to establish some very key goals, and I plan to do that in the near future here, and you'll see those on that SDC website at masonschooler.com/SDC. I'll try to kind of boil this down to what are our major things we're trying to accomplish, and they'll be along these lines basically. Of course, the major goal is to increase awareness of these, I want to say, unified sources of information from these various channels. The fact that there is continuity, that there is a cohesive message, that a cohesive picture of the universe that we're getting from all of them, and that is valuable, and that there's valuable information. That kind of message, increasing awareness of that, just that will be probably one of the major overarching goal. But then, of course, facilitating that, as we get more people, hopefully, helping to collect the various readings from various sources, catalog them, transcribe them, put them into a searchable database, make them available. Also make available these related books. Maybe I'll just start a little store or something where people can easily find all the related books that I mention and seem to be important by other authors and things, so that we can sell those if people, and of course, have links to Amazon or wherever else they're available if people just want to get them there. Or things that are public domain. I definitely need to get the Paul Solomon or the Andrew Jackson Davis works up on the site in some kind of form that's accessible and also available for sale where possible. And who knows, if we get big enough, maybe we'll get into printing so we can publish decent copies of all the works of Andrew Jackson Davis and these other readings by all these other sources. And that would be another overarching point. And there definitely seems to be a need for that, because there's disorganization, or just naturally these guys that are still alive or have only recently passed on, Ross Peterson, Douglas Cottrell. Douglas Cottrell obviously still alive, obviously still very active in giving readings. And I was talking to his wife, and she's just talking about how they used to have mountains and mountains of tapes of readings, and they eventually just ran out of space and had to chuck a bunch of the older ones. So the only copies of those would be the ones that the people have that the reading was given for. And I'm afraid that for Ross Peterson, it's going to be the same kind of thing. The only people that have transcripts or recordings will be the ones who the readings were given for by and large. So I think what's going to happen is this organization I'm starting will issue kind of a continual appeal to the public for people to, as they feel so led, to submit any works they want to that are recordings they've gotten or transcripts they've gotten for themselves or people they know that approve of it from these various sources, and hopefully we'll be able to then draw in a lot of this older information that's been lost. And of course we'll be working with the Cottrells to hopefully get more organized about archiving and transcribing and making available as much of that information and those readings as possible. And then there's, I think, basically the other, so there's drawing attention to the readings and facilitating the cataloging of the information and dissemination of the information. That's one thing, and probably the goal at the forefront. But this organization, I intend to have a much larger goal of applying all of the wisdom we glean from these readings, and that's going to translate into everything, all kinds of fields of endeavor: scientific research, art and music, and healing, and philosophy, religion, politics, economics, you name it. It will probably eventually spill over into all those areas, and that's my larger vision then, to as we bring in people that are interested in particular veins of those endeavors, that the organization could be kind of a clearinghouse for those kinds of people, a place where we could provide people housing, facilities for scientific research, funds, whatever is necessary to help facilitate that as we have that stuff available. Assuming the organization grows and is prosperous. So that's kind of the overarching goal there for SDC, and I'll try to boil that stuff down to some concise statements and put that up on the website as kind of a starting point. And for now, I'll try to increase the cross-linking between the Paul Solomon Foundation and Douglas Cottrell stuff and the SDC site, and just try to facilitate, make it very clear and very easy for people to get between those different sites and organizations, and so that nobody's in the dark as far as what is available there. And so that's, I got a lot. If you read the reading or listen to it, there's a lot of encouraging information on that organization overall and starting it, and that it is a worthy cause, and it should be very profitable or prosperous, eventually once I get it started and get into it. So I'm going to work on that. That's kind of my immediate goal now for the next few weeks, is to work on kicking that thing off, getting that started, getting the ball rolling, getting the word out, going around the local area here where I'm at and speaking. So now I'm currently located in central Iowa. And yes, in a way, this is partially inspired by the Coming Earth Changes readings. I just didn't want to have the wife and the kids trapped in California with no way for us to get out down the road, which I'm sure there would always be a way. I didn't really feel a need to be paranoid, but it just seemed like this was the best time. Just the way everything was working out with work and everything, and the fact that we were really planning on driving all the way to Iowa for Christmas and everything, and it just seemed like a good opportunity to kind of move the home base there, and even if I'm continuing to do research on the West Coast and whatnot, I'll just be going there myself and periodically or whatever, if that's what I'll be doing. So yeah, I plan to make decisions regarding that as well and everything in the next few weeks. But another thing that the reading brought up, which was completely unforeseen on my part, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't have been, but appreciate my perspective here. I do realize that there is a kind of in my life, there's been this acceleration. People talk about the singularity in these technological scientific circles, right? And that's supposed to be this thing where our technology and science and everything and intellectual evolution of man accelerates to the point where we can evolve ourselves or something. So then it just exponentially, our progress increases or something. But I do feel it's kind of a lot of that I think is just bunk or just intuition, that there's really perception of what's going on other levels, not necessarily hard scientific or whatever. But anyway, in my life, there's just been this unbelievable acceleration. As I said, I discovered Casey like way back in the 90s, and didn't discover Paul Solomon until back in March or April or May or something last spring, and then boom, in November or whatever, when I first start this address, these guys make me aware of Ross Peterson, Douglas Cottrell, and I get a reading from Douglas Cottrell. So I go from thinking Casey's the only one, to realizing there are lots of others, to realizing there's at least one still alive, to getting a reading from that one, and then now in that reading, this guy's sitting here telling me that supposedly I have the ability to channel in this manner. Now, whether or not that will take presumably will take some effort and development, just as it did for Ross Peterson and Douglas Cottrell, because it's completely unforeseen to me. I mean, look, I don't have any kind of psychic abilities I'm aware of, at least nothing overt. I can't bend spoons or levitate objects or see people's auras or walk through walls or, anything like that. I always considered I had about the psychic capacity of a rock or something as far as those kind of propensities. But nevertheless, the source seemed to be quite insistent that I had the same ability, could easily develop or something, or evidence the same ability to channel. So the only answer to me that I can give to that is I obviously need a little more help, especially considering it's available. If there was no other help available, sure, I would probably just read up on it all I could and try experimenting and try not to be too dangerous about it. But thankfully, we have Douglas Cottrell available, who was basically trained by Ross Peterson to do this, to learn how to do this. So I definitely plan on looking at some point in the near future here, looking to Douglas Cottrell to get some pointers, if not some out-and-out coaching on how to do this and develop the ability to do it well and do it right. Because obviously, of course, there's a need for that. And of course, I'm not the only one. And the reading seemed very clear that, look, this isn't about a few gifted individuals. This is about the fact that this is a capacity of mankind. Psychic abilities are the birthright of mankind, along with all these other talents. They've just been shunned and not developed. And I did get a chance to ask about this big question: are there other sources? First of all, are these sources I found legitimate? I was especially concerned with Andrew Jackson Davis, since there seem to be some points he's not necessarily on the ball with. And that was an interesting answer. The source is basically saying, look at these different factors. Look at why these guys do it. Look at the volume of their works. Does it seem to be something just to make them look good, or is it to help people? And those are easy questions to answer for every single one of these guys, including Andrew Jackson Davis. The motivation of their work is to help other people. These guys probably get at least as much, if not more, negative attention for bringing themselves forward as these kinds of channels as they do positive attention. So it's definitely not for fame or glory or anything, I don't think. And the volume of information is just incredible from all of them. And the span of time over which they continued to work at it over their entire lives, basically. So that was encouraging. And all of those that I mentioned, except for Andrew Jackson Davis, were mentioned by name as being minds that Douglas Cottrell kind of communed with or learned with when he first started developing these abilities. And I was encouraged to reach out my mind to touch these, realizing there are no real barriers of time or space, reach out my mind to touch these other entities, your Casey, Paul Solomon, Ross Peterson, Douglas Cottrell, for guidance and assistance or something. And personally, being this complete psychic meditation novice, to me that does have meaning, and sure, I can try to think about them for a while and try to clear my mind, but definitely nothing miraculous happening yet. So I don't know. The source said, take your steps. And I definitely feel that I've got some steps to take, some baby steps. It's all about learning how to crawl and then learning how to walk, I guess. So it'll be a process for me over time, hopefully not too long. But the question also I was burning to ask did get answered about, are there other sources? And the answer is yes, but just use your intuition to find them out. How did you find the sources you found so far? Look back to look forward. Seek them and you shall find them and stuff. But he did thankfully give me some pointers on how to locate them. Apparently, the source flat out said on the internet you can search for things like people who are able to tell the future and successful about it. And then you look at those people, look at their lives. Are they benevolent? Do they have a large body of work? Do they have other abilities? I suppose that would mean like healing or clairvoyant type abilities and things. Which, looking at myself, if you ask those questions of me, it's like, well, no, I don't have any clairvoyant abilities. I guess I know. This is giving me the feeling I have a long ways to go. But apparently, yes, there are many other sources. Yes, they will come forward as it is time for them to do so. But also, yes, it is appropriate to look for them. Yes, I will find more. And so hold on to your hats. There apparently won't just remain these 5 sources of information we've got so far, these 5 channels. There will be more. And as we find them, the goal of our organization is not to focus on a fixed body of people. The goal of our organization is to focus on this process of being a genuine channel, finding those genuine channels, and making their works available, increasing public awareness of them, and most importantly, increasing public awareness of the continuity of the information. If they are genuine channels, there will be coherence in the information they're saying. They will be saying the same types of things about the same types of things, and that in a way now that's an easy litmus test. Now that we have all these different sources to corroborate things with, the continuity is there, and that can be the litmus test by which we discover these other genuine channels, because the continuity will be there for them as well, of course. And fear not, as we find them, we'll make you aware of them as we are aware of them. And if you are aware of any, please, by all means, bring that information forward. So, okay, that was the main gist of the reading. At the end of the reading, I had one question directly about a couple directly about myself. One was a simple change I could make to increase happiness, and that was fantastic. Talking about the spirit of gratitude, and I've already tried to implement some of those things and found some modest results and some fantastic advice, I think, for a lot of us in that portion. And then at the very end of the reading, I managed to ask about a possible past life associations with an individual I was involved with earlier on in this life, and that was a fantastic, just a utterly mind-blowing for me, probably more personally for me than anyone else, thing to hear about. But of course, feel free to read about it. I think there's lots of interesting stories in there, and I don't think any real historically important aspects in there, but still interesting stuff. And so that was it. That was the first reading that I've gotten. Of course, I assume I'll be getting more down the road, but I definitely plan on trying to, as the Paul Solomon sources said, to diligently use what I've been given, apply it as much as I can, and then as I feel the need to seek more. But it's definitely, man, there's a lifetime's worth of stuff I could apply just from this one reading, so I definitely plan on trying to work at that. And hey, we've got 20 minutes. Good, I might be able to pack everything into this hour-long session here. So, some other points I wanted to bring up. First of all, the Akashic Records. I've mentioned that before. I had kind of this little brief synopsis of it in some previous addresses. And when I went back to read this Paul Solomon reading that deals specifically with the Akashic Records, I found out it was absolutely nothing like what I remembered or portrayed, so forgive me for falling flat on my face, but again, keep in mind, don't view this address as a definitive source of all information that came through these channels. If you want the real thing, go to the real thing and read it. And I'll try to be more clear as I'm made aware of such discrepancies. So there's a fantastic reading here. It's Appendix E in this Volume 1 of the Paul Solomon readings. And it is about the nature of the Akashic Record. And apparently Dion Fortune, or Dion Fortune, not sure how to pronounce her name. I looked her up. She was a psychic in Great Britain. I guess apparently a very famous one, perhaps employed by the government or something during World War II. I can't remember. But she has passed on. But apparently her spirit or soul or that entity was burdened or was inspired to communicate a very specific piece of information to us. And that was namely how magnificent this Akashic Record was and how involved and magnanimous the process was of delivering these readings. Now, again, I'm being the novice I feel like anymore, I'm definitely not 100% clear on, in every specific reading, where this information comes from. Like, you get a Douglas Cottrell reading, and a lot of times he talks about the minds that he's been sent to, or the minds he's conferring with, and I don't know, in some sense that almost starts to sound like he's not necessarily going to the Akashic Record, or maybe that's not in my Akashic Record. Like, if I'm asking about crystals in Atlantis, and if it's not something I've been involved in, well, that wouldn't be in my Akashic Record, and he would have to look to other minds. Perhaps that does mean looking at their Akashic Record. So I'm not 100% sure if this applies to every single reading, but it almost seemed that's what Dion Fortune was getting at when she communicated through this channel in this reading by Paul Solomon, that it was the process that happened every time a question was asked of these channels, every time that we came to get a reading. So perhaps this is what happens. Maybe that would be a good question to ask if I get a future reading. Is this process specifically a process that is undergone every single time that I get a reading or anyone gets a reading from Douglas Cottrell or any of these sources? And I'm not exactly sure what the answer would be on that, but at least for many of the readings, at least for some of these channels, maybe all of them, this is the process that occurs. And what she outlines is not really something that is like a machine, like I said before. It always seems kind of like it in the sense that it's very fast and very complex. But apparently the Akashic Record can be viewed as I want to say not a loom, like a tapestry that has been woven with all kinds of detailed threads that interact. And what she seemed to really drive home here was that every person that you ever rub shoulders with, whether friend or enemy or anything, their thread will be in your tapestry of your Akashic Record in some sense. So not only something that is tremendously complex, but something that is tremendously interconnected with all of the rest of the information out there. So I guess you could start to see how you could say there's one library, one Akashic Record, Grand Akashic Record, containing everyone's particular Akashic Record. But she seems to talk about just one, for just one individual, how complex and how humongous and lengthy that record really is. And the process, she says that we each have a recording angel that is assigned to us. So angel being an entity that never sank to the depths of being in the flesh and being kind of wayward departing from God to that degree. And an angel being someone who's always been dedicated to God's service clearly. And apparently, each entity in existence has a recording angel assigned particularly specifically to that entity. So, for example, I have apparently a recording angel that has been assigned to me, whose job is to do nothing but take every single thought, every single whim, fantasy, event, interaction, you name it, that has happened in the entire existence of my soul, and weaving it into this record, recording it. And then when a channel is requested information about me, then a mind of some entity that's involved here will be zipping along this thread in this record to find all the relevant information. And she tried to communicate how unbelievably huge of a task it was to take this almost infinite amount of information about just one person and to glean the few tidbits that were pertinent to the question at hand that could be communicated in a small period of time. That it was basically an insurmountably complex task that was being carried out routinely every time a question was answered from these channels. And she outlines it more specifically, and I can't, of course, include it all here. I guess I would just encourage you to, at least spend the $10 or $20 or whatever it is to get the PDF download of the Paul Solomon readings on the Paul Solomon Foundation website. Or if you're, a little more into it, get the printout. It's a really nice book for like $50 after shipping, and read this thing if you're really interested. But it has lots of great information about the process of reading from the Akashic record, about how complex it is, about how many entities are involved, about how in just a given reading for a given individual, an incalculably humongous host of beings, of entities, was gathered to confer with. And so that kind of resonates with Douglas Cottrell when he's talking about going to the mines or consulting with other minds and everything. Well, apparently part of what is going on is they're consulting whoever is interacting, like perhaps the higher self of Douglas Cottrell is interacting with these millions, billions of other minds that have been gathered, which represent all of the people, which are all of the entities that you have ever interacted with, and perhaps will in the future, I'm not sure. Realizing there are no limitations of time or space, because of course those entities are all over the place doing all kinds of things right now. But due to the fact that there is no real time, I'm sure there's no problem with them all congregating at once for the occasion of a given reading. But she really wanted to communicate through Paul Solomon in this reading how many people there were and how big of a thing it was, for this event to take place. And just a fantastic reading. It's at least 5 or 6 pages long about that. So yeah, the Akashic record and the process of giving the readings, some really valuable insight there. And on that note, at the beginning of this book, of Volume 1, Paul Solomon had a reading about the source of the information. He's got like his own personal statement about the source, and then reading about it that's really fantastic. And that also really drove home some important points. Nothing really leaps out at me at the moment. Maybe I'll have a separate, at some point we'll probably have a separate address that's just, again, solely devoted to the source of this information, since it's such an important point. Here we go. It's on page 32. What source do we contact through this channel? Paul Solomon reading number 9. And also it was a question apparently in that reading about the creation. So the entity communicates to us kind of a joint message about how, and I'll read this last paragraph. So he does talk about these other entities that are involved and charged with protecting us and things. And in the end, he says, "You ask then, does God speak through us? Consider all those things that have been told you before. Does God not live in the heart of this channel? Does God speak, then, through us? We would say to you, no. Understand this. We speak to you through God. This being understood, then, all knowledge is of God. The source is of God. The source comes through you, through God to you, and comes blessed of God." So again, to me, laying fears to rest about, is this legit, is it not, are we secure and relying upon the harmony of these sources? Yes, we are. And no, we don't need to get all caught up in, which particular entity is communicating. Is this Halaliel? Is this the higher mind of Paul Solomon or Cottrell or something, and therefore is it more or less fallible? No, I don't think we have to have those kinds of concerns. For these genuine channels, we are getting genuine information, and none of them may be perfect per se. So therefore, if there are imperfections in grammar and things, of course, that's not a problem. We have to look at the spirit behind what they're saying. But also, just as with any kind of religious endeavor, we have a whole body and an ever-growing body of readings and works to cross-reference with each other to gain a larger wisdom. So again, this isn't about getting a simple, clear answer to a question that is quick and easy and obviates the need for any other kind of source. This is about being given what we can use at a given point in time when we ask a question, and being responsible for putting that together with what else we've been given and with applying it in our lives before we'll be given more. In one of these readings, they talk about how you're asking for all knowledge about the dawn of creation and prehistory and everything, and you ask, why haven't we been given the wisdom of the ancients and stuff? And, well, the reason that we're not given all wisdom and all knowledge in a clear, concise manner right up front is that we're not ready for it. Information is useless if it's not applied. That reading talks about the mind becoming intellectually fat, meaning that it gets lots of knowledge but never puts it into practice. So this is a process. This isn't just about taking information and making it available to people. It's about those people taking that information and doing something with it. So that is really why this SDC organization will also be about the application of this information. Because if we are not applying it, if we are not putting this stuff into practice, testing these things to see if they're true, and benefiting from them, benefiting humanity from them, then it's just completely wasted knowledge. It's worse than if we had never even been told it and we were just completely ignorant. So there's a responsibility, I guess, on all of our parts to progress, to try to put this stuff into practice, to try to do something with it, and do whatever we can to improve the lot of humanity, especially this day and age where it appears that we're in for, some hectic times, some really massive changes, which possibly, quite possibly, a large majority of humankind will not even survive. So not to be afraid, but to be diligent, to become aware of all this stuff, do what we can, be responsible, and realize that this lifetime is just a breath in the life of the soul, as the Source always says. That we're here to do whatever small piece of the work that we're here to do, and we can be content with that. If that is going to be over tomorrow or next week or whenever, that's fine. Death is nothing but a transition, and we'll still be around to grow. The important thing is to use this time we've been given grow ourselves and grow each other along the way, and I guess progress back to God. That seems to be the overarching theme. So, got a couple other topics here. I'm not sure. Oh, I can talk briefly about it, and perhaps if I feel so inspired, I'll do a complete, maybe another hour-long reading or address about this. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was the difficulty of this information for a lot of us. A lot of us came from religious traditions. A lot of us come out of conservative, traditionalist type backgrounds. And a lot of us struggle with a lot of this information. And all of us have friends and families that, as they become aware of it, struggle with it to some degree, some more than others, or just can't deal with it. And it creates a large degree of conflict within our minds, within our lives. And I don't think it's the fault of the readings. It's the fault of our limited growth to this point, and the kind of calcified structures, if you will, the arthritis that has grown into our society and culture, and created a lot of stagnation and stubbornness in our spiritual lives. So I understand there's a lot of difficulty. I understand that there's this in the back of all of our minds, if we're religious and we first stumble on this, there's this question of, boy, is this from Satan or is it from God? Is it all deceptive? Is it all designed to just draw us away down some wayward path, or is this the work of the beast that's going to be coming and draw us away, and are we really serving the Antichrist when we become involved in this and all this stuff? And of course, very legitimate questions, very traumatic questions, and something in the end that each of us has to come to a realization ourselves. No one can tell us this or that is the truth, and that's the beginning of our problem in the first place. I think a lot of us have always been getting our truth from others, and that's helpful. I mean, it's helpful to get wisdom from others, but not to get the statement that this is the end of knowledge, that you cannot get more, that this is definitive and infallible, and anything that contradicts from this or this interpretation in any way is completely in error. The core teaching I'm, of course, getting at is this fundamentalist Christian and just general Christian teaching that the Word of God is holy, infallible, and closed, and it was given to us as this pure and perfect document. It's all we need, all we'll ever need, and it's the last word. That is something that we all struggle with when we come across this humongous, ever-growing body of new information that seems to contradict the Bible, or at least our initial interpretation of it on a lot of points. Definitely with the traditional interpretation of it on a lot of points. And I don't think there are easy answers to a lot of those questions. Of course, the overarching answer would be that there is a reality that transcends all of this, that really does exist, and the Bible gives us a glimpse of that from certain perspectives, sometimes clearer than others. And these sources give us a glimpse of that from a different perspective, maybe a larger perspective, sometimes clearer than others. And our interpretation, of course, of all these sources will definitely be unclear at times. And it means a different thing to a different person based upon where they are at that point in their life and what they're ready for. So I think in a subsequent reading, maybe next week or maybe another one this week or later today if I have time, we'll give an extra reading, or an extra weekly address about that topic of conflict with existing religions and everything, because I think it's a big stumbling block for a lot of people, and it's crucial that we deal with that and get over that so we can benefit from it, if we can benefit from these things. So until next time, read up on the reading I just got from Douglas Cottrell. Check it out, and we'll see you soon.